Hello, and welcome to Luxoft podcast series, where we discuss the latest technology trends with IT experts, looking at things from a unique perspective. My name is Patrick Corcoran, Global Director of External Relations at Luxoft, and I have the pleasure of being your host today. I'd like to introduce Amit. Amit is a lead analyst and associate director at the sourcing advisory firm and transformation consulting arm, ISG. Today's topic will be the changing IT outsourcing landscape.
One of the things as, someone responsible for analyst and advisor relationships is I run into lots of debates sort of about nomenclature, right? How are we describing digitization, transformation, delivery, engineering? That type of lexicon has come up more and more often than I ever have saw from my role. And I find myself not entirely understanding the way the market is actually perceiving these types of things. I mean, we have our own position. Certainly ISG has a position on how they read that. How are you seeing the confusion that lay in the market just from a lexicon perspective?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Patrick. I think you're absolutely right. There is a lot of chaos in the market. There's a lot of confusion in the market in actually defining what digital means. Because if you really look at different clients, digital means different things to them, right? And the common problem we see is, where does the digital journey start? Is it modernizing the legacy ecosystems in the IT, or is it killing the older ones and bringing in new stuff? So I agree with you. There is a lot of chaos. I think from what we see really in the market is very simple approach to it: identifying business challenges, applying technology to it, and solving the business challenges. Yeah. Digital is as simple as that, and that's what we advise clients to think about. That's how we approach digital, and it could be any level of technology. It could be consulting plus technology. It could be even pure consulting, right? So it completely depends and on the approach that the clients really want to take.
Yeah, so business outcome, I think, has become a very, very popular phrase used too in deliverable for a project, right?
Yes.
It's not about the technology piece to the entire extent of the end of the project life cycle, but it's about the business outcome. Now, by virtue of that, would you equate business unit involvement in sourcing from an enterprise side with driving the need for business outcome? Or could we argue that even prior to mixed environments and purchasing, business outcome was always the end game anyway, but it just wasn't generalized as much as it is now, or popularized because of who was buying it then?
Yes. So in a sense, business outcomes have always been there. Unfortunately, they were not as pronounced as we see today, right? If you look at what happened in 2008, most of the IT projects which were large in scale came to a standstill, and the question that CIOs got was, well, we have invested X amount, and what's the ROI?
Yeah.
And that's where the discussions on business outcomes actually began. If you really look closely, originally the whole idea of bringing in a provider was a business outcome, and somewhere it just got lost till 2008 happened, and people again went back to understanding what the ROI was. Thankfully, the discussion is back on table.
Sure.
And this is one of the reasons we see a lot of decisions and discussions happening at a business unit level, right? So in the mid era of when the IT transformations were happening, CIO was the person who used to take all the decisions. But we see a bit of disempowerment to the CIO. The powers have now been distributed. The CMO plays an equally important role in choosing and making those decisions, because he understands what technology means and what does he really want to offer to the market. The HR business now realizes the power of analytics, and they have a complete control on what they want to do. So in some sense, the power of a CIO is now being equally distributed amongst business units who are being looked at not just as a cost center, but in a true sense becoming an integral part of the revenue operations.
So the hierarchy in and of itself within end user enterprises has actually changed the way services are being bought, because a CIO historically would always report into a CFO,
yes,
right, which was responsible then for what's our ROI. And that's not particularly the easiest question to answer when you're dealing with even back office, middle office, and front office operations. So it's interesting to see how the buying cycle regardless of involvement of different units, has actually changed because the hierarchy of the way IT is governed within the end user has changed.
The overall operation of buying or procurement is evolved a lot, at least from what we really see. Decisions are being made faster. They are more practical and closer to the business than they earlier were. The great part about such a process is the ROI, as the CFO needs to get his numbers, they look much better now. And one of the primary reasons is in-point solutions or solutions which actually solve a business problem are more in demand than a complete suite of solutions, out of which half of it may not be of any use anyways, right? So
yeah. So apart from obviously your job as to identify certain providers or ecosystem recommendations for us, and obviously recommend providers to buyers, do you find yourself doing a lot more training and education for units that are now involved, i.e. the business, on what the technology actually means? So you're becoming sort of a de facto CTO lecturer for these people that are now buying services. Are you teaching more? Is that what you're seeing?
Oh yes, we are spending a lot of time in awareness generation, and because the buyer is changing now, the CIO would know what technology means, and he would understand everything that the service providers would talk to him about. Now, since the entire the profile of a buyer has changed, they rely on firms like us who are expected to come on table and explain and help them understand not just what business outcomes are expected, but also how the technology would work for them. So in a way, we are playing a role of, as you rightly said, a CIO coach, where we shadow the CIO and work with the business units.
And at the same time, that's really changed our model too, to have a much better consulting front end than ever before, because there is this business outcome prior to what the code is going to look like in the QA testing, et cetera, around the development piece. It's certainly been an interesting journey, and I think when you look at the nearshore model, that offers us a great opportunity to sort of play that out.
I think it's a great strength, and in my opinion, not many providers have this very unique ability to interact closely with regional accounts. Clients do expect a very close cultural affinity, and especially when you're in an education role where an advisory firm works with somebody like Luxoft and go to a client, being very close in terms of the nearshore facility, in terms of cultural affinity, understanding, there is no better way than have this model to deliver value to the client, at least in my opinion. So you guys are best placed from what I see right now, and I think it's a great story to share.
Yeah. So let's end on a question of the role of history here in ITO. So there's always the discussion around vendor consolidation and then vendor liberalization, right? Up and down, up and down. Now, I think for 30 years, you can argue that was the only sort of trend that was happening. But now, by virtue of digital and transformation, because of business unit involvement, are we seeing other types of slopes and slippery slopes going to appear in the history and the future now of ITO?
Not really. If you really look at what really happened in the last 30 years, it was rise of 5 megalith companies, and then they started understanding how businesses work. Companies mushroomed. There was a large scale of tier 2s and smaller firms coming up, and the consolidation came in. The business objectives were different. I think the trend will continue. But what is amazing to see right now is the nature of consolidation. In the olden days, when I say olden days, is basically a decade and a half back, the consolidation was primarily driven for geographic expansion and more about client acquisition. But if you look at the consolidation happening today, the complete methodology has changed. People are looking at buying specific capabilities. They are buying at specific abilities to bring on the table, which typically never existed in the market, right? So this phase will continue for some more time till we actually have 5 or 6 mega players again. But I think this is here to stay. It's a nature that will continue to change.
Yeah. It's going to be an interesting future, that's for sure.
Yes, for sure.
Well, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.